In a video quite some time ago, I said I was going to eventually talk about methods of improving your level of consciousness, and in my opinion, fasting and eating a clean diet gives kind of a baseline for an improved level of mental clarity and an improved state of consciousness, which is perhaps why fasting and most other things which elevate your level of consciousness are very controversial in mainline society. In modern society, fasting is generally seen as odd and counterculture, and that doesn't really make sense to me because although only a few limited scientific studies have been done, those scientific studies generally show that fasting is healthy and good for longevity. And as well, practically every world religion promotes some type of fasting, and most traditional cultures promote some type of fasting. So whether someone believes in religion or science, or both, it would seem that those disciplines say that you should fast, and yet the average person views fasting as something very odd. When I first heard a lot of the claims made by people in the fasting community, I thought that they were a little extreme, but I kept an open mind and tried it myself, and I've come to agree that fasting does aid mental clarity, and it probably does it by cleansing the body of toxins, just as people in the alternative health movement have been saying for quite some time. And I know that's a very controversial claim, and ultimately you just have to try it yourself and see if you feel the same way. But let me just go through the theory behind how many people who have the most experience with fasting feel that it cleanses the body of toxins. Basically, the theory is that when you stop eating for a while, your body has a break and is able to flush out toxins that otherwise have accumulated. You'll notice, for example, that if you don't eat for a day, many people will get a headache and they'll have other detoxification symptoms. And there are a lot of different scientific explanations for why this happens, but you'll notice that if you start to eat a clean diet and fast occasionally, you won't have those detoxification symptoms anymore, which leads me to believe that it actually was a symptom of detoxification rather than some other cause. So the theory is that when you're not eating, the pancreas isn't overburdened creating digestive enzymes like it usually is, and instead the pancreas is able to create enzymes which help detoxify your body. And yes, this is just a theory. It's probably the most common theory among leaders in the fasting community, but no, it hasn't really been studied in depth by science because there's no funding there. There's no money to be made in fasting, really. But it does make sense to me, and you can certainly investigate it more yourself or just test out fasting and see what you find. The average American is really eating a lot of heavy food, and in particular a lot of sugar without any enzymes in it, whereas naturally we would be eating things like raw honey, which are very high in enzymes. So this does certainly create a heavy burden on our pancreas, and that's probably why there's an epidemic of diabetes in America today. But it also probably does have secondary effects, potentially like the diminished ability to detoxify your body because you don't have any spare enzymes to help in the detoxification process. And then on top of that, we're eating incredibly contaminated and adulterated food. So in my opinion, these two factors cause an unnaturally high load of toxins to the average person eating the Western diet, and this manifests in many ways, such as getting a headache if you finally do have a chance to detoxify by skipping a meal or two. But you'll also notice that once you clean up your diet, you don't have these detoxification symptoms anymore, unless you eat something unhealthy, and what you'll notice quickly is the most unhealthy foods, the foods that give you a headache the quickest, the foods that are potentially impacting your brain the worst. And it's foods like conventional animal products, which are stale and overcooked. More than anything else, this is what I notice and many other people notice. Fresh animal products, which are organic, don't seem to have as much of a problem, and food which isn't overcooked doesn't seem to be as much of a problem. You know, there's not a great deal of understanding as to what causes many types of headaches, but ultimately I think pain in the body always indicates that damage is being done to those cells. So consider that if you're giving yourself a hangover and it hurts, that you've potentially done damage to your brain cells. And if you're eating a diet which is causing you headaches constantly, then potentially you're damaging your brain cells that way as well. I talk about the actual mental effect a little bit more in my video, Food and Health and Intelligence, but basically a lot of people in the West tend to have kind of a feedback mechanism in their thought process, and in extreme cases this comes out as déjà vu or repeating a song constantly in your head. But it also has a subtle effect on the entire thought process. Your entire thought process tends to loop back upon itself, and this kind of creates a narrower view of any subject. It doesn't lead to expansive thinking. And it also is somewhat egoic because your thoughts constantly loop back upon themselves, and this kind of reinforces the ego. Again, potentially why religions are always so in favor of fasting. And it's just something you have to try out yourself and see if you notice an effect. So in the little bit of time that's left, let me talk about different types of fasts, and you can certainly get a lot more information online and get information from people that are more knowledgeable about it than me. Religious fasts are anything from eating only vegetarian food for a certain period of time to eating nothing for days or even weeks. Technically, eating only vegetarian food is not a fast, but many religions promote it at various times of the year, and I imagine because it's a less adulterated diet. But a true fast of eating nothing for a certain period of time really shows the starkest contrast between the typical diet and a perfectly clean period of taking in no toxins at all. And I think it's useful, if for no other reason, that you'll really see the difference. I also think a lot of people tend to overcomplicate fasts. I mean, if you feel terrible doing something, then your body's telling you to stop. But if you just feel moderate hunger, then that's normal. So I think you just have to follow your body's symptoms rather than try to set some predetermined limit on how long you're going to fast or exactly how you're going to fast. I would just say follow your intuition, and of course you should be in good health to begin with. If you're eating a deficient diet, fast is probably the last thing you want to do. So I think it's very important to have a good baseline for health, and to do that by following traditional diets, things that have worked for generations, things that have been developed empirically by millions of people, rather than following anything too extreme at first. It's really a long process, I believe, to work through any problem, whether it's toxins in your diet or anything else that you're first learning about. And I think it becomes a problem for many people when they take something too far because they feel that it's the cure for all their ills now that they've learned this information. And one other thing that I think people run into when you do anything to improve your level of consciousness, it brings up problems. That's why many people purposefully deaden their level of consciousness. You see, many people are alcoholics because they're not willing to deal with something in their life, something that they've repressed. Many people just watch TV constantly. They can't even stand to sit for a minute and think, because there's something there in their consciousness that they would prefer to block out. And when you do anything like fasting or cleaning up your diet, you'll almost always, in my opinion, bring up some issues that are repressed in your subconscious, and you just have to be prepared for that and ready to deal with that. You can look at my video, What Anger, Fear, and Guilt Are Telling Us, and there are many, many techniques out there to deal with issues in your subconscious as they come up. So that's my video on fasting. I do feel that it's a really important practice, along with eating a clean diet, and that this is really the foundation for beginning to expand your level of consciousness.